against oppression and are for the rights of the Palestinians and the right to live a dignified life away from the bloody grasp of the occupation. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Zaki for his statement. I now give the floor to Mr. Nasser Kamel, Secretary General of the Union for the Mediterranean.
Thank you, Madam President. I wish to thank you and thank Malta for the opportunity afforded to the Union for the Mediterranean to address the UN Security Council on this very important matter. As you know, the Union for the Mediterranean came as a revival of the Barcelona process, a process that was launched 30 years ago on the hope brought about by the Oslo Accords, with the promise of shared peace, stability, and prosperity in the Euro-Mediterranean region. A promise that could only be attained through a well-rooted peace built only and exclusively on the two-state solution. Unfortunately, that is also the same promise that we collectively failed to achieve. Referring to what the Secretary General of the United Nations said this morning on the scale of the catastrophic situation in Gaza, he mentioned that civilians in Gaza are suffering widespread starvation. He stressed the need for a quantum leap in humanitarian aid in Gaza, and also he recalled Security Council Resolution 2728 demanding immediate ceasefire during Ramadan, leading to a lasting ceasefire and also the release of all hostages. Madam President, on the 27th of November 2023, the Union for the Mediterranean foreign ministers met in Barcelona to discuss the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The co-chair of the UFM issued a joint communiqué and identifying points of convergence during that meeting, which are: UFM member states expressed grave concern over the humanitarian situation in Gaza. They stressed the need and obligation to protect civilians and to respect international humanitarian law by all and at all times, and condemned indiscriminate killing and targeting of civilians. They also stressed their rejection of any displacement of Palestinians from Gaza or the West Bank, as well as the internal displacement of Palestinians inside Gaza. They reaffirmed the collective responsibility to achieve a just, lasting, and comprehensive solution to the Palestinian issue on the basis of the two-state solution, and emphasized commitment to working together to realize the two-state solution to ensure freedom and dignity for Palestinians, sustainable security for Israelis, and lasting peace and stability for the entire region. They also called for implementing the two-state solution with clear timelines and agreed implementation mechanism with two sovereign and secure states, Palestine and Israel, living side by side in peace and mutual recognition on the basis of the 4th of June 1967 lines. Madam President, more than 30 years ago, we made a promise to our citizens. It is time to deliver on it. Israel and Palestine are founding members of the Union for the Mediterranean. And we at the Union for the Mediterranean, we believe we can be a keystone in shaping a new vision for the future of the region. War and vengeance can only lead to more brutality. The only way to ensure security for both Israelis and Palestinians is to collectively exert the necessary pressure to stop this conflagration and stop it now. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank Mr. Kamal for his statement. I now pass the floor to the representative of Saudi Arabia.
Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the group of Arab states. First, I would like to congratulate you, Madam President, on your country, Malta's assumption of the Council's presidency this month, and we express to you our extreme appreciation for the efforts that you have made genuinely throughout your presidency, and which undoubtedly have reflected the great appreciation that you have for this solemn task of the presidency of this council. We also thank you for holding this historic session and meeting, which is being held in very delicate times that require the solidarity and cooperation of the entire world to overcome it. Madam President, the delegation of Algeria on behalf of the Arab states in this council, submitted a draft resolution that has been long awaited by Arab and Islamic peoples and by people who love fairness and peace. This draft resolution recommends granting full membership to the State of Palestine in the United Nations. This is a legitimate right that embodies the call by the Palestinian people who have and for decades suffered from oppression and marginalization as a result of the coercive and discriminatory measures taken against it, including depriving the Palestinian people of the right to self-determination and independence. The actions by the Arab group come as part of the efforts that have been made by the Palestinian Authority and in coordination with the member states of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation as well as the non-aligned movement. And we would like to express our sincere gratitude to all states that aim to vote in favor of what is right and what is legitimately the right of the Palestinian people today. And we tell you today that you are taking an honorable position that reflects your noble values and your great humanity. The Palestinian people and Arab and Islamic peoples and other peoples that love peace in the world will never forget this historic position that you are taking today. These peoples will not forget those who will vote against the resolution today, because voting against this resolution will deprive the Palestinian people from their legitimate right to full membership and is an appeasement of the Israeli occupation authority that completely rejects the two-state solution and continue to impose the harshest punitive measures against the Palestinian people. Madam President, over 140 states have recognized the state of Palestine, and this is the great majority of the member states of this organization. Other states will join this group, and they are currently in the final stages of taking decisions to recognize the state of Palestine. This recognition is in line with what has been stipulated by most of the resolutions issued by this council, including resolutions number 242, 338, 1397, 1515, 1860, 1850, and 2334, as well as General Assembly resolutions 181 and 194, all of which stipulated a two-state solution and giving the Palestinian people their dignity, sovereignty, and independent state. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, this will not be the last attempt as the Group of Arab States, and we will continue to knock on this door, the door of the Security Council, and demanding the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people, because we fully believe that granting Palestine full membership in this organization is an important step on the path towards peace and stability in the region. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, over 190 days have passed since the aggression on the Gaza Strip began. We continue to witness the Israeli war machine targeting civilians in the Gaza Strip and perpetrating the worst forms of collective punishment, such as eviction and starvation and homelessness and siege. All of this is happening in the midst of shameful international silence, which only encouraged the occupation authorities to further their inhumane actions and practices. The occupation forces are declaring their intention to launch a ground offensive on Rafah in southern Gaza, which is the last resort for the people of Gaza, thus ignoring Resolution 2728 and other relevant resolutions. The Security Council has been unable to undertake its role because it is being held hostage by political considerations and narrow interests that do not allow it to shoulder responsibility towards international peace and security. Therefore, we renew our call on this Council to take a resolution under Chapter 7 of the Charter that would guarantee that Israel, the occupying power, would abide by a ceasefire and by providing humanitarian aid access and putting an end to this abominable aggression against the Palestinian people and providing protection to the Palestinian people. The Group of Arab States stresses the importance of making the occupying state abide by Security Council resolutions of relevance, international law, and international humanitarian law, in addition to the two orders issued by the ICJ recently in the genocide case where that against Israel and which Israel is perpetrating against the Palestinian people. The Group of Arab States also reiterates that it will continue working at all levels and in all international fora to strive for peace in the region. Our group will continue to work on ensuring that the Israeli occupying state will abide by an immediate ceasefire and allow the unhindered access of humanitarian aid. Here, we would like to commend the efforts made by the state of Qatar and Egypt to arrive at a humanitarian ceasefire agreement in order to alleviate the catastrophic situation in Gaza and secure the release of detainees from both sides, and to allow for the entry of more humanitarian convoys and humanitarian and relief aid. We express our hope that these efforts will contribute to a ceasefire and an end to the siege and would alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian people. In closing, Madam President, we renew our call upon the members of the Council to support the draft resolution that would help achieve peace and stability in the region and is in line with Security Council and General Assembly resolutions of relevance. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Saudi Arabia. Whilst I recognize the importance that is attached to this meeting, I please have to ask every speaker to respect the 3-minute limit for the statements, because we really do have a long list and we are not going to be able to get through many today if we continue at this rate. So I now pass the floor to the representative of Egypt.
سيدة الرئيس أتقدم لكم بالشكر على جهود.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank you for your efforts to follow up Palestine's request for full membership in the United Nations, and we thank Algeria for its initiative to propose a draft resolution, and we thank those who intend to vote in favor of this draft resolution today, as in recognition of the legitimate and inherent right of the state of Palestine and its people to a state, as is the case with other peoples. And the Palestinian request is simple, and it is equality in rights and legal status among all peoples, equality between Palestinians and Israelis. This is what is just, and there is no question about it. The continued illegal and criminal war that Israel is waging on Gaza and has been doing so for over 6 months, and which has killed more than 33,000 martyrs and injured more than 75,000, and has led to the death of over 175 United Nations staff, in addition to Israel's continued disregard to the resolutions that have been issued by the Security Council, the General Assembly, the Human Rights Council, and the ICJ, places in question the credibility of this organization and the entire order of the maintenance of international peace and security. The inability to stop this ugly war is something that is difficult and impossible to explain to anybody with a live conscience, be they members of the Arab and Islamic peoples or any peoples that love peace. The fact that some choose to disregard logic and the principles of justice and the charter, what the charter has stipulated, is the reason that we have reached the dismal situation that we are at in the Middle East. And we are at the edge of a precipice if we haven't fallen in it already. This is a result of Israel's continued belligerent behavior, because it believes that it is above the law and above being held accountable. It is launching one attack after the other on neighboring states and on diplomatic buildings and premises, in a blatant violation of the principles of international law that require the inviolability of diplomatic premises, as well as a violation of the Vienna Convention. This has led to a vicious cycle that is difficult to contain from a military perspective in the region. Everybody will lose, and these repercussions will be negative for all. Egypt rejects Israeli attempts to spread the fire across the Middle East and to open new fronts in this war in order to distract international world opinion from its barbaric war in Gaza and the catastrophic humanitarian situation that is a result of its actions. And we believe that Israel is not the policeman of the region and has no right and no justification to aggress others, regardless of the excuses. We also warn that any appeasement of Israel's continued attacks on neighboring countries will lead the Middle East to a downward spiral that will be catastrophic and whose price will be paid by all in the Middle East and in the world. And the Secretary General has made warnings and in this very council on the 14th of this month, saying that the world can no longer tolerate another war, and we must heed the warning signs before it is too late. Therefore, Egypt calls upon all parties to exercise the greatest degrees of self-restraint and to be responsible and to stop resorting to force to resolve conflict. Madam President, there will be no peace and no security and no stability in the region except through the settlement of the Palestinian question. Therefore, it is important to primarily focus on an immediate halt of hostilities and the war on Gaza. And that should be done in implementation of Security Council resolutions 2712, 2720, and 2728. There is no priority that is above this priority. And here we make this stand clearly that we will not allow and we will not tolerate any attempt by Israel to take advantage of the current regional atmosphere and use flimsy excuses to attack Rafah or expand its scope of military operations in Gaza. Madam President, Egypt has always been in favor of peace and working towards peace despite all obstacles, and Egypt will continue its mediation efforts despite the obstacles it is facing. It will continue to work with Qatar and the United States to put an end to the war and to make sure that there's humanitarian access and to ensure the release of Palestinian detainees and Israeli hostages. Therefore, Egypt calls upon the Security Council once again to issue a resolution under Chapter 7 of the Charter for an immediate and permanent ceasefire and to oblige Israel to open all borders crossings around Gaza and to allow access to aid, which is still tied despite the continued repeated Israeli claims that it has allowed the entry of this aid and opened the crossing points. It must also allow for a mechanism for humanitarian access under the supervision of Sigrid Kaag and according to Resolution 2720. And we must stop the forced eviction, whether inside Gaza or to neighboring states. We also ask you to take a resolution that would prevent the exporting of weapons to Israel in implementation of the Human Rights Council resolution. And you must hold Israel accountable for its crime and oblige it to pay reparations. Madam President, Egypt calls upon the members of the Security Council to support the state of Palestine's request for full membership. It is a state that has fulfilled all requirements. It has historic borders that were recognized by GA Resolution 181 on the partition in 1947. It is a land that has been occupied by Israel in June 1967. It has permanent residence in the West Bank, in the Gaza Strip, in East Jerusalem, an active and effective government. It enjoys diplomatic ties with many countries in the world. Palestine is a state that is recognized by 140 member states in the United Nations and has acceded to a large number of international conventions in the multilateral order. Moreover, Palestine is a member of many international organizations such as UNESCO and others, and fulfills all the practical requirements for the concept of a state, as well as those that have been stated in Article 4 of the Charter in a manner that qualifies them to join the United Nations as just like any other state. GA Resolution 67/19, which discussed Palestine's status in the United Nations in 2012, expressed hope that your council would positively consider Palestine's request for full membership in the United Nations. And therefore, Egypt calls the members of the Security Council to consider this application and implementation of United Nations resolutions which have for decades demanded the fulfillment of the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. And this comes within the framework of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on the equality of all people. This membership will be a positive step and a positive push for the peace process and negotiations on the implementation of the two-states resolution, a state of Palestine and a state of Israel that are equal in sovereignty sovereignty rights and membership in the United Nations. In closing, the Middle East will not witness any stability without the rise of an independent Palestinian state on the 4 June 1967 borders, and without a resolution to the Palestinian cause. This is with the rise of a state with East Jerusalem as its capital. This is the only just and comprehensive resolution to the most dangerous time in our recent history. This is what we must seek to strive, and there is no alternative. Thank you, and I apologize for speaking so long.
It was very long. I thank the representative. I understand the importance that you attach to this particular meeting and this subject that we are discussing. I now pass the floor to the representative of Qatar.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, I would like to congratulate your sisterly country on presiding over the Council, and we commend your leadership of the works of the Council, and we welcome the presence of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Malta in this meeting. We thank the Secretary General for his statements, and we align ourselves with the statements by the Arab Group, OIC, and NAM. Madam President, the alarming developments in our region over the past days proves the validity of what Qatar has warned against repeatedly in relation to the expansion of the scope of conflict unless bloodletting has stopped in Gaza. In relation to these developments, Qatar reiterates its calls to all parties to de-escalate and exercise maximum restraints, and calls on the international community to move immediately to defuse tension and prevent the region from spiraling into violence. The situation in Gaza is an unprecedented humanitarian crisis, and Qatar reiterates its condemnation of all forms of targeting of civilians and civilian objects, and all practices by the Israeli occupying authorities in relation to the collective punishment policies, deprivation of food, medicine, and basic services. Qatar rejects any military operation by the occupation authorities in Rafah. Such a situation requires the full respect of international law, including international humanitarian and human rights law. It requires that all measures should be taken to put an end to the humanitarian crisis and to prevent the famine. This requires the delivery of humanitarian aid at scale with immediately and in a safe, unfettered manner. The humanitarian actors proved that the only way to achieve this is an immediate ceasefire. We welcome once again Security Council Resolution 2728 calling for ceasefire in Gaza that leads to sustainable ceasefire. This has been the pursuit of the diplomatic efforts of Qatar. We reiterate that the resolution should remain valid under the Charter. The international community and this Council bears the responsibility of implementing international law without double standards. We also stress that the orders of ICJ should be implemented. The orders related to Israel taking effective measures to prevent genocide in Gaza and ensure the delivery of necessary aid. Madam President, Resolution 2728 recognized the diplomatic efforts by Qatar, Egypt, and the U.S. My country attaches great importance to these efforts, which have achieved tangible results to alleviate the suffering of people in Gaza and the hostages on both sides. Qatar will not shy away from continuing its efforts to ensure all hostages have been released and international sufficient humanitarian aid has been delivered. We call for the need to put an end to the continued escalation in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. The occupation authorities should stop their crimes and the violations of rights of Palestinian people and the siege of their lands, as well as the expansion in the settlements. Madam President, Qatar condemns the systematic Israeli targeting against UNRWA and reiterates that sufficient funding should be provided to UNRWA. Therefore, Qatar has increased its funding by $25 million in addition to previous contributions. Through the Arish airport, Qatar has continued to provide thousands of tons of urgent needs over 92 planes, in addition to the casevac of 22 injured Palestinian people to receive treatment in Doha. Madam President, the only guarantee to achieve peace is a ceasefire that leads to meaningful political talks that lead to comprehensive settlement of the cause according to international resolutions and the two-state solution that ensures the establishment of an independent state of Palestine on the borders of 1967 with East Jerusalem as its capital, with the Palestinian people enjoying all their inalienable rights and the enjoyment by the state of Palestine of its status as a full member to the UN. In this connection, the state of Qatar supports these draft resolution to be submitted by Algeria, the Arab member to the Council, that recommends the acceptance of the State of Palestine as a full-fledged member to the UN and calls on other members of the Council to support this request, and which is an important step that supports the two-state solution and the settlement of the Palestinian cause. Thank you, Madam President.
شكرا السيد الرئيس.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, we associate ourselves to the statement of Algeria, the Arab representative in the Security Council, and with the statement of KSA on behalf of the Arab group. Ladies and gentlemen, the establishment of an independent, sovereign Palestinian state is a natural, historical, and legal right of the Palestinian people. It is a right guaranteed by international law and international humanitarian law. The recognition by the international community, represented by the UN, of the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination is a position enshrined in several resolutions that I do not need to enumerate. And for those doubting its legality, you can go back to the list of resolutions starting Resolution 181 of 1947. The State of Palestine also fulfills all the conditions stipulated by the Montevideo Agreement of 1933 pertaining to the rights and obligations of states. The Palestinian people is the people that has continuously lived on its land. The UN has repeatedly recognized its right to self-determination in all its resolutions, and so did the ICJ in 2004. The State of Palestine also fulfills the membership conditions in the United Nations. It is committed to the principles enshrined in the UN Charter and has both the ability and the willingness to abide by these obligations. Most importantly, Palestine is a peace-loving state. Yes, Palestine is a peace-loving state. Unlike what the buffoon of the Israeli entity has tried to promote today in a desperate attempt to convince everyone that the resistance by the Palestinian people of occupation amounts to terrorism. This buffoon, as usual, has also described this Council and the UN organization as multilateral supporters of terrorism, or multilateralism terrorists. This is what he said about this organization, and he ignored that it is this same council which granted its entity full membership in the organization. But I and many people consider that this membership is only in form, but it lacks the moral component, considering the atrocities they have committed for 7 decades. 7 decades during which the Palestinian people has suffered all forms of oppression and injustice, have tried all avenues of peace. So yes, the Palestinian people is a peace-loving people. And if this buffoon, the representative of the entity, does not recognize this organization, they should withdraw their membership and should not be part of these sessions if they do not recognize the organization and if they think that we support terrorism. Ladies and gentlemen, the resolution tabled today by Algeria on behalf of the Arab and Islamic group to grant Palestine full membership in the United Nations comes at a time when 140 states around the world has recognized the state of Palestine. In other words, 75% of the peoples of the world have recognized the state of Palestine. Despite that, some are still talking about reviving the peace process and a peaceful settlement for the crisis based on the two-state solution. Why this contradiction, and why insisting on hindering the full membership of Palestine in the United Nations? Isn't this a requirement for the peace process? Libya has always been and will remain steadfast in its position towards the just cause of the Palestinian people and their right to self-determination, to the return of the refugees, and to the establishment of their independent state with Al-Quds al-Sharif as its capital. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who are still trying to distort the truth, I would like to reiterate what we have repeatedly said. You cannot limit the current crisis to the 7th of October. And you cannot forget the violations and massacres committed for more than 7 decades in all the occupied territories, as if the violation of the territories in 1948 and displacing people from its land is not the real cause of the current conflict. This was followed by the expansion of settlements and blockade, followed by humiliation and displacement. Therefore, Libya will not allow to condemn the resistance of the Palestinian people and describing them as terrorists. At the same time, we will not accept the justification of terrorism committed by the occupation forces under the pretext of self-defense. What self-defense, and against whom? Against those whose rights were violated and whose land was occupied. How can we equate between the occupier and the victim? How can we equate between the colonizer and the occupied? And who among you got their freedom and independence without resistance, especially when you reach an impasse and when you lack any peaceful solution? We have all been witnessing live the genocide against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. We have discovered the fake slogans of human rights that were being promoted. The Council was unable to impose the implementation of its last resolution 2728. Therefore, we associate ourselves to the call of the Arab group, and we call for resorting to the 7th chapter and to intervene and guarantee the delivery of humanitarian assistance immediately. But we know perfectly well that this will not happen because we are living in an era of double standards, and especially in this region. In conclusion, I would like to address our people in Palestine. I would like to tell them that Libya stands with you, and we will do whatever we can to uphold your sacrifices. Just like you, we have lost our trust in the international community, but rest assured that the Libyan people and all the free peoples of the world will not give up on you, and we will stand by you and support your right to resist and to self-determination. The countries of the world have to prove today that the human conscience is still alive and that they will confront this aggression and this blatant injustice against Palestine and humanity as a whole. They have to support the granting the state of Palestine full membership, and this is not a goal in itself, and it is not a charity. This is an inalienable right and a first step to recover all the just rights of the steadfast Palestinian people. Thank you, President.
And the representative of Libya, and pass the floor to the representative of Liechtenstein.
Thank you, Madam President. Liechtenstein continues to be gravely worried by the catastrophic situation in the Gaza Strip and increasing escalation and instability in the wider region. We are deeply concerned by the large-scale loss of civilian life, in particular the shocking number of children killed, the massive displacement of the civilian population, as well as the rapidly deteriorating humanitarian situation and acute food insecurity visited on the people of Gaza. 3 months on from the previous open debate on this topic, Liechtenstein was pleased to see the Council adopt a product addressing the ongoing protection of civilian crisis in Gaza by demanding an immediate ceasefire for the month of Ramadan, many months after similar calls by the General Assembly. We commend in particular the E10 on their crucial role leading up to the successful adoption of Resolution 2728. However, we deplore that the holy month of Ramadan has now ended without its implementation. We were also disturbed to witness a counterproductive and unfounded suggestion that Resolution 2728 might not be legally binding. We simply wish to quote the text of Article 25 of the UN Charter that, and I quote, "The members of the United Nations agree to accept and carry out the decisions of the Security Council in accordance with the present Charter," end of quote. If there is any doubt, especially in the minds of Council members, that this is an unequivocal statement on the legally binding nature of Council decisions, there is little reason left to aim for Council action. Madam President, further action by the Security Council to protect civilians and to bring about an immediate, durable and sustained humanitarian ceasefire is urgently needed. Such a ceasefire is crucial for unhindered and sustained humanitarian access as well as to enable the release of all hostages. In this regard, we call upon all parties to fully respect international humanitarian law, including by granting immediate, full and unhindered access to humanitarian organizations. And we condemn again in the strongest possible terms the heinous 7th October terrorist attacks by Hamas and call for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. Madam President, instability in the wider region is closer than ever to spilling over into active hostilities. Liechtenstein condemns the Israeli airstrike against the Iranian consulate in Damascus at the beginning of this month. We also condemn in the strongest possible terms the drone and missile attacks by Iran against Israel last weekend. Liechtenstein calls on all parties to exercise utmost restraint. In all circumstances, any use of force must strictly comply with international law, including Articles 2 and 51 of the UN Charter, and all parties must strictly comply with international law at all times. Diplomatic buildings must not be targeted, and civilians' infrastructure must in all situations be protected. De-escalation remains of the highest priority, and we welcome any statements and concrete actions to end this cycle of violence in the region. Madam President, Liechtenstein is committed to the rule of law at the international level and supports the role of the International Court of Justice in the settlement of disputes, including under the Genocide Convention. Liechtenstein is following the ongoing proceedings in the case brought by South Africa against Israel closely, including the consideration of provisional measures, and emphasizes the importance of compliance with any measures ordered by the court. To conclude, Madam President, Liechtenstein reaffirms the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and its strong support for a two-state solution as the only way to bring a peaceful, stable and sustainable solution for the region. Liechtenstein is of the view that Palestine fulfills the basic criteria for statehood under international law. In this regard, we also note the renewal of Palestine's application for full UN membership. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Liechtenstein and pass the floor to the representative of the Philippines.
Thank you, Madam President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, firstly, allow me to express our sincere gratitude to Malta for organizing this crucial debate on the situation in the Middle East, including the Palestinian question. We commend Malta's leadership and commitment to fostering dialogue on this pressing issue. The Philippines expresses its serious concern over the increasing tensions between Israel and Iran. We urge all parties to refrain from escalating the situation and to work towards a peaceful resolution of their conflict. The Philippines has long advocated for all states to adhere to the principles of international law and to the peaceful settlement of disputes. In line with our commitment to peace and stability in the region, the Philippines reaffirms its support for a two-state solution. We believe that Israelis and Palestinians deserve a common future where their rights, aspirations, and security are upheld. We thus urge all parties to refrain from unilateral actions that undermine the prospects for a peaceful resolution to the conflict and endanger the life and livelihood of citizens and migrants alike. The dire situation in Gaza demands immediate attention. With over 90% of the population facing food insecurity and critical shortages of electricity and water, the suffering of innocent civilians is intolerable. The scale of displacement and destruction of homes and schools is alarming, threatening the future of an entire generation. We stand in solidarity with the affected communities and emphasize the imperative of providing life-saving humanitarian assistance to alleviate their plight. We call for the protection and safety of civilian seafarers passing through the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, and the Gulf of Aden, and other contiguous areas, not only to ensure free flow of commerce, but also to safeguard innocent lives. Protecting the rights and welfare of seafarers is a key priority for the Philippine government. In this regard, we seek the support of the international community to spare no efforts to have them released and returned home as soon as possible. We reiterate the belief that the interrelated conflicts in the region should be resolved through diplomacy and adherence to international law, leading to free and unimpeded commerce and freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. The Philippines welcomes and recognizes the paramount significance of UN Security Council Resolution 2728, which addresses the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The ongoing humanitarian crisis demands swift and unified action from the international community. In this regard, we urge all parties to fully implement UNSC Resolution 2728 without delay in order to alleviate the suffering of innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. To date, the situation in Gaza remains dire. Tens of thousands have died and millions are displaced. The Philippines is one with the international community in calling for lasting, sustainable ceasefire, the safe release of all hostages, and the unhindered delivery of humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. Furthermore, we reiterate our firm support for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, and urge the international community to provide sufficient and predictable funding to ensure the continuity of its vital humanitarian work and development work, including on education. Madam President, the enduring Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains a pivotal determinant for the peace and stability in the Middle East. Recent exchanges between Iran and Israel further exacerbates the tension and threaten to accelerate the spiral of violence in the region. The Philippines ardently urges all parties to elevate dialogue as a primary tool for a peaceful and lasting resolution. We strongly advocate for diplomacy to prevail in resolving differences. The Philippines stands ready to support efforts aimed at achieving a comprehensive and lasting peace in the Middle East. More than ever, the Philippines emphasizes the importance of upholding the UN Charter, international law, and relevant UN resolutions as the foundation for a just and peaceful resolution of the Palestinian question. We call on the international community to redouble its efforts to promote dialogue, de-escalate tensions, and work towards a future of peaceful coexistence of the populations of Israel and Palestine for the peace, stability, and prosperity of the Middle East. Thank you, Madam President.
Philip, South Africa.
Thank you, Madam President, and we'd like to thank Malta for convening this quarterly open debate on the situation in the Middle East and providing all UN member states the opportunity to address the Council on developments in the region. South Africa aligns itself with the statement to be delivered by the Republic of Uganda on behalf of the non-aligned movement. Madam President, it's been 6 months since the current war in Gaza began on 7 October last year. Almost 34,000 people have been killed, of which almost 14,000 have been children. Thousands have been displaced and are at risk of famine. Developments in the Middle East following the retaliatory action by the Islamic Republic of Iran against Israel, following Israel's attack on Iran's embassy in Damascus, are of great concern to South Africa. Clearly, there is a very real danger of a devastating region-wide escalation. All parties must exercise their utmost restraint and avoid any act that would escalate tensions, particularly in this fragile region. South Africa has continuously stressed that irrespective of whether states believe that their use of force is lawful, it is never wise to resort to war, as inevitably it's ordinary people who bear the brunt of the conflict. The international community and the United Nations Security Council in particular must act in the pursuit of sustainable and just peace for all people. Madam President, the Security Council, as a body responsible for the maintenance of international peace and security, has convened numerous debates and has adopted several presidential statements and resolutions on matters pertaining to the protection of civilians. For example, Security Council Resolution 2417 calls on all parties to armed conflict to comply with their obligations under international humanitarian law. It underlines the importance of safe and unimpeded access of humanitarian personnel to civilians in armed conflict. It strongly condemns the use of starvation of civilians as a method of warfare and strongly condemns the unlawful denial of humanitarian access, of depriving civilians of objects that are indispensable to their survival, including willfully impeding relief, supply, and access for responses to conflict-induced food insecurity. It's not enough for us to sit, debate, agree on paper, but fail to act when we face the real-life manifestations of what Council members are committed to prevent, and that are the outcomes of these horrendous actions. The Security Council must take concrete steps to prevent gross humanitarian suffering in pursuant to its own commitments. Otherwise, why bother adopting statements and resolutions that would become meaningless should they be ignored? Madam President, nothing can justify the deliberate killing and injuring of civilians, as well as the use of famine against hopeless and traumatized civilians. No doubt, the entire population of Gaza is enduring destruction at a scale and speed without parallel in recent history. Nothing can justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. Thus, the ongoing historic injustice with decades of Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territory continues to pose a serious threat to regional and international peace and security. Madam President, it's been 3 weeks since the Security Council's adoption of Resolution 2728, demanding an immediate ceasefire. However, Israel continues its devastating attacks on the Palestinian people. The proliferation of global conflict will continue if we, as the international community, do not commit ourselves to the ending of war and the establishment of conditions under which justice and respect for international law are maintained. Madam President, as Palestine pursues its right to seek membership to the United Nations, the international community must avoid any retributive actions that could stifle the very existence of the state of Palestine. South Africa believes that the right of the Palestinian people to have their own fully independent state must be recognized by all, and the aspiration for membership of the UN should be supported. In closing, Madam President, acknowledging the legitimate concerns of all involved parties is a crucial step towards fostering stability and harmony in diversity. And let us remind ourselves that the central issue in the Middle East is the materialization of a two-state solution whereby Israel and Palestine can live together, side by side, in peace and security as two independent and sovereign states. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of South Africa and pass the floor to the representative of Bangladesh.
Madam President, we commend the Presidency of Malta for successfully steering the work of the Council in April 2024, and especially for convening this high-level open debate. We thank the Secretary General for his comprehensive briefing. My delegation aligns itself with the statements to be delivered by Uganda and Mauritania on behalf of the NAM and the OIC respectively. Madam President, in last 6 months, we have been repeatedly urging the Council and in the General Assembly for an immediate ceasefire to save the innocent civilians' lives in Gaza. However, the reality continues to be absolutely frustrating and unacceptable that the death toll is rising, people are dying in front of us, and we are here every time reporting the rising numbers, which has crossed 34,000 now. Even though this Council finally could adopt Resolution 2728 3 weeks ago, calling for an immediate ceasefire during the month of Ramadan, leading to a lasting, sustainable ceasefire, nothing has changed on the ground. Aggression and killing of innocent civilians by Israel continues. We are also nowadays being educated that Security Council resolutions are not binding. Madam President, we are witnessing continued, unabated, and planned killings of civilians unprecedented killings of UN staffs, humanitarian workers, destroying of hospitals and shelters, forced starvation, and blocking of humanitarian assistance while millions of people are in dire need of emergency life-saving assistances. But unfortunately, neither killing of civilians has been stopped, nor the life-saving assistances have been reached. The prospect of a negotiated ceasefire, despite repeated hopes, still remains elusive. Apart from the ongoing unhindered carnage in Gaza, we are also witnessing increasing violence by the Israeli forces and settlers against the Palestinians in the West Bank. Now the question is what else we can do in the multilateral platform to stop this indiscriminate attack and killing of civilians, which are tantamount to genocide and crimes against humanity. Call of this council is ignored and disregarded. Not only this council, decisions of the General Assembly, the Human Rights Council, International Court of Justice, all are being blatantly disregarded by Israel and its allies. Madam President, we commend Malta as the current president of the Security Council for calling upon the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to expeditiously complete the ongoing investigation, which we fully support and echo. Bangladesh, in line with a strong value-based position against mass atrocity crimes, has been one of the 5 member states who referred the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories to the International Criminal Court in November 2023. We are also deeply concerned that Israel is not following the directives of the International Court of Justice. Today, we call upon all member states of the UN to abide by the recent Human Rights Council resolution calling for, among others, cessation of arms transfers to the occupying power. Madam President, we do not know what is actually pulling this council back from accepting the state of Palestine as a member, as a full UN member, while overwhelming majority in the General Assembly voted for it, while almost all the members are supporting the two-state solutions. We strongly urge the Committee of the Admission of New Members to recommend admission of the State of Palestine as a member state of the United Nations. We call upon all members of this Council to unanimously support the resolution approving Palestine's full membership in the UN. Please note that we have overwhelming support in the General Assembly in favor of the full membership of the State of Palestine. Madam President, in a different note, Bangladesh strongly condemns the attack of 1st April 2024 on the consulate building of the Iranian embassy in Damascus, Syria. Bangladesh stresses that the principle of inviolability of diplomatic and consular premises and personnel must be respected in all cases. We are also deeply concerned over the current developments and serious escalation between Iran and Israel, which threatens peace and stability in the Middle East. We call upon all parties to work for avoiding any further escalation of conflict. We believe that the root cause of all past and present instability in the Middle East is the prolonged Israeli occupation of the Palestinian and Arab territories, its repeated aggression and atrocities in the occupied Palestinian territories, and its apartheid-like treatment of the Palestinian people. Regrettably, they are doing all this with total disregard of the international community in the form of numerous UN resolutions calling for the end of the occupation and the establishment of a Palestinian state, as envisaged in the two-state solution. Without solving this core issue, we cannot expect peace in the region. We also believe that supporting the two-state solution but opposing the full UN membership of the State of Palestine is surprisingly contradictory. Madam President, we once again urge this Council to take immediate measures to stop the Israeli atrocity in Gaza by taking all possible measures to implement Resolution 2728 and also to bring an end of decades of long Israeli occupation and aggression against Palestine. In this regard, we would like to reiterate that only solution of this crisis, the only way to establish peace in Palestine and the whole region is to establish an independent, viable, and sovereign Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital under the two-state solution based on the pre-1967 borders, and granting the admission of the State of Palestine as member of the United Nations. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Bangladesh and pass the floor to the United Arab Emirates.
Sayyida Raisa and board,
Madam President, I thank His Excellency Ian Burg for presiding over this meeting, and we congratulate Malta for assuming the presidency of the Council for this month. I also thank the Secretary General Antonio Guterres for his participation and important brief. The UAE aligns itself with the statement delivered by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on behalf of the Arab group. Madam President, the UAE calls on all Security Council members to vote in favor of the draft resolution that recommends granting Palestine full membership in the United Nations. When the General Assembly adopted Resolution 6719 in 2012, expressing its hope that the Security Council would respond to Palestine's request for full membership, it was clear that the majority of member states supported the request. That's because Palestine has fulfilled all requirements. So what is the Council waiting for in order to support this request? The State of Palestine has proven to be an active member of the international community. Its statehood is already recognized by 140 countries. Palestine has continually demonstrated its commitment to the United Nations Charter and its support for peace. It has also joined many international conventions and treaties. The State of Palestine also plays an active role in regional and international organizations, particularly within the United Nations, as illustrated through its successful chairmanship of the Group of 77 and China in 2019. I repeat, what more is this Council waiting for in order to support Palestine's request for full membership? Madam President, our discussion regarding Palestine's full membership is an integral part of the historical commitments of the United Nations, and especially this Council, towards the Palestinian people. By adopting General Assembly Resolution number 181, this organization committed to establish 2 states in Palestine, 1 Arab, 1 Jewish, and it tasked the Security Council with taking the necessary steps to implement this resolution. While the State of Israel was subsequently established, the Palestinian people are still waiting for the establishment of their state. Granting the State of Palestine full membership is a crucial step that would consolidate peace efforts. It would affirm, through both word and action, that the international community is committed to the 2-state solution as the only way to end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The events of recent months have proven that international community approach to managing this conflict, instead of taking concrete steps towards a resolution, remains a futile course of action. Today, Gaza is experiencing a bloody war that has claimed the lives of more than 30,000 people. As for those who have survived, they continue to face bombardment, famine, disease, and the threat of displacement. The West Bank is also experiencing its bloodiest 2-year period in more than 20 years due to Israel's continued mistreatment of the Palestinian people. The continuation of these events will only lead to an increase in violence and dragging the region into new levels of instability. The recent escalation in the region, especially in the past few weeks, confirms this. Against this backdrop, the international community, and in particular the Security Council, should take carefully considered steps to address the violence and bring peace to the region. Extinguishing the flames of violence throughout the occupied Palestinian territory and ending the escalation in the region must be a priority. This includes reaching an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza Strip, saving the people from starvation, and using diplomatic means, negotiations, and dialogue to peacefully resolve conflicts. Israel must also stop all escalatory and illegal actions in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. It must bring an end to settler violence, including their armed attacks against the Palestinian towns and cities, as we saw occurring in the many villages last weekend. These are serious crimes, and perpetrators must be held accountable. At the same time, we must be firm in demanding that all concerned parties comply with international law, including international humanitarian law. They must take all necessary measures to implement relevant Security Council resolutions, including resolutions 2712, 2720, and 2728. This means allowing the safe and unobstructed entry and distribution of humanitarian aid, using all available crossings. This also includes supporting the efforts of the Senior Humanitarian and Reconstruction Coordinator for Gaza, Ms. Sigrid Kaag. We must ensure UNRWA is able to its indispensable relief efforts. Further, the need to protect civilians and humanitarian workers, and refraining from targeting civilian facilities, namely the health facilities, remain paramount. We reiterate our strong condemnation of the killing of humanitarian aid workers, including during the recent Israeli targeting of the World Central Kitchen convoy, which significantly impacted humanitarian operations in the Gaza Strip. Finally, we stress that ending the repeated violence in a sustainable manner requires reaching a just, lasting, and comprehensive solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through a viable plan for the two-state solution. We must ensure that the parties return to a serious and credible negotiation process with a clear time frame. This is the only way to guarantee the security, stability, and prosperity of the Israeli and Palestinian peoples, as well as the region as a whole. Thank you, Madam President.
United Arab Emirates, I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Sheikh Niang, Chair of the Committee of the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, I would like to congratulate Malta for assuming the April presidency of the Security Council and for convening this meeting at ministerial level, elevating the Council's attention to the gravity of the prevailing crisis. I also extend my gratitude to the Secretary General for his briefing and tireless efforts toward achieving a just and lasting solution to the question of Palestine in accordance with international law and relevant UN resolutions. The Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People rejects linking the origin of the current crisis solely to the abhorrent attacks of 7 October 2023 inside Israel. The historical context, spanning over 76 years on the UN agenda, helps to understand the illegal Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, decades of documented human rights violation, grave breaches of international humanitarian law, and 17 years of blockade of the Gaza Strip. Addressing such issues is essential for a just and lasting solution to the question of Palestine, including the current catastrophic crisis in Gaza. Our committee welcomed the Security Council's belated adoption of Resolution 2728/2024, demanding an immediate ceasefire during the month of Ramadan, leading to a lasting, sustainable ceasefire. However, the committee deeply regrets that the resolution was not implemented. Ramadan is over, and thousands of Palestinian civilians continue to be killed and maimed. This must stop. Israel's war in Gaza has resulted in high civilian death among Palestinians, extensive displacement, denial of food and medicine as a weapon, plausible genocide, and consistent violations of international law, including disregarding ICJ orders. Blatant disrespect for international law undermines the UN and its authority
eroding the multilateral system and the Council's standing. In 6 months of this horrific war, the occupying powers' military operations have killed over 33,000 Palestinians and injured over 76,000, mostly women and children. Deliberate obstruction of humanitarian aid has plunged 1.1 million civilians into starvation, disease, and death. Gaza is today victim of an openly admitted human-made famine. At the same time, Israel's occupying forces and armed settlers continue to inflict violence and dispossession of the Palestinian population in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. Since the start of 2024, according to the Israeli organization Peace Now, Israel's confiscation of Palestinian land and settlement expansion has grown massively compared to previous years. Israel's illegal settlement activities and its illegal occupation must stop. The committee commends the UN, member states, and NGOs for aid efforts in Gaza, while condemning Israel's deliberate attacks on humanitarian workers and infrastructure. We note that the disparity in attention devoted to these incidents, including the killing of 178 UNRWA and other staff, and the equally horrendous World Central Kitchen staff tragedy. We continue to demand unrestricted humanitarian access in Gaza. We also demand a stop to the targeting of journalists. Over 150 of them have been killed in Israeli attacks. Moreover, the international press must be allowed access to Gaza. The committee strongly denounces Israel's persistent efforts to undermine UNRWA, the only entity with the capacity to address the needs of civilians in Gaza. The committee opposes any attempts to shift the status of Palestinian refugees as per GA Resolution 194 of 1948. We must not let UNRWA collapse as the ramifications go beyond mere humanitarian concerns. It would threaten to ignite new flames of tension and conflict in an already volatile region. The committee urges donors to promptly resume funding UNRWA and to support the full implementation of its GA mandate. The committee welcomes the UN Human Rights Council resolutions of 5th April, urging, among other measures, to prevent forced transfers of Palestinians and halt arms sales to Israel. We acknowledge efforts by Egypt, Qatar, and the US towards achieving a permanent and sustainable ceasefire and the release of all hostages and hope for an agreement. We must strive for peace in Gaza to prevent escalating conflicts that threaten global security. The committee urgently calls for an immediate halt to Israel-Iran escalation, emphasizing adherence by all to the UN Charter's principles. The committee urges the Security Council and member states to support the States of Palestine's application for UN membership. This crucial step will support the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and the realization of the two-state solution. We salute the ongoing efforts of the EU countries planning to join the 140 member states who already recognize the State of Palestine. We welcome the appointment of a new prime minister in Palestine to lead the government to help streamline recovery and reconstruction efforts. I conclude with a plea to all member states, including council members, to heed the calls of the GA, as well as civil society, civil servants, and citizens throughout the world who are clamoring daily for an end to the carnage in Gaza, accountability for egregious crimes committed by all parties, and for vigorous efforts to achieve a just, lasting solution to the question of Palestine. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Nyang for his statement. I pass the floor to the representative of Indonesia.
Thank you, Madam President. Indonesia appreciates Malta's strong leadership in continuously supporting the Palestinian cause. This chamber has often heard that peace in the Middle East will only be realized when Israel's occupation of Palestine ends, with the realization of a two-state solution. Today, the Council has the opportunity to move us closer towards this goal. Indonesia therefore commends Algeria for the draft resolution recommending for the full membership of the State of Palestine to the United Nations. This is a long overdue course of action to uphold justice, to help restart negotiation towards a two-state solution on equal footing, to give hope to the Palestinian people. How can we achieve lasting peace if Palestine is continuously denied its right to equal standing in peace negotiations? Indonesia therefore calls on all members of the Council to use your moral compass and support the resolution. Denying Palestine its rightful place in the UN will undermine the credibility of the multilateral system, perpetuate the cycle of violence, and render peace even more elusive. Madam President, Israeli-Palestinian conflict has endured for far too long. The current crisis in Gaza has cost over 34,000 lives and counting, with the majority being innocent women and children. The ICJ provisional measures stated Israel's attack on Gaza amounts to genocide. The Council must stop this catastrophe and pull the Middle East back from the brink of a wider regional conflict. We call on Council members to walk the talk, to ensure an immediate ceasefire, the scaling up and effective delivery of humanitarian assistance in Gaza, and implementation of all resolutions on the political settlement of the conflict. Madam President, let us not forget of the daily realities of millions of Palestinian refugees. A just and lasting peace must address their legitimate rights, including their rights of return. Until there is a final political solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we must therefore double down on our support to UNRWA. UNRWA is a lifeline for millions of Palestinian refugees and a stabilizing force in the Middle East. We must ensure that UNRWA can fully implement its mandate. In closing, Indonesia challenges members of the Council to be on the right side of history. Let us embrace humanity over atrocity, diplomacy over discord, and dialogue over division. Together, we can pave the way for a future where peace prevails. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Indonesia. There are still a number of speakers remaining on my list for this meeting. I intend, with the concurrence of members of the Council, to suspend the meeting until next week. The meeting is suspended. The 9,609th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the admission of new members. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Israel to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. I propose that the Council invite the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine to the United Nations to participate in this meeting in accordance with the Provisional Rules of Procedure and the previous practice in this regard. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of Item 2 on its agenda. In a letter dated 2nd April 2024, addressed to the Secretary-General, the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine referred to the application of the State of Palestine for membership in the United Nations contained in document S/2011/592, dated 23rd September 2011. They requested that renewed consideration be given to that application by the Security Council. The letter has been issued as document S/2024/286. The report of the Committee on the Admissions of New Members concerning the application of the State of Palestine for admission to membership in the United Nations has been issued as document S/2024/313. Members of the Council have before them document S/2024/312, the text of a draft resolution submitted by Algeria. The Council is ready to proceed to the vote on the draft resolution before it. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make statements before the vote. I give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Thank you, Madam President. Before I deliver my statement, I would like to express my gratitude to you, Madam President, for organizing this meeting and also for your outstanding efforts in chairing our Council during this month. We truly value your hard work and personal commitment. Madam President, on behalf of my country, Algeria, on behalf of the Arab Group, on behalf of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, on behalf of the Non-Aligned Movement, and on behalf of countless other peace-loving countries, I stand before the highest organ entrusted with the maintenance of international peace and security to introduce the draft resolution on the admission of the State of Palestine to the United Nations. On November 15, 1988, my country, Algeria, was home of the declaration of the independence of the State of Palestine. Today, the call of history resounds once again, and it is my honor to put before the Council the recommendation to admit the State of Palestine as a full member of the United Nations. It is a critical step towards rectifying a long-standing injustice. Late Yasser Arafat, in his epic declarations proclaiming the state of Palestine, lamented then the exclusion of Palestinians from the international community. He said, and I quote, "At a time when the contemporary world was formulating its new value system, the balance of local and global power excluded the Palestinians from the common destiny. It became clear once again that justice alone does not move the wheel of history." End of quote. Today, we strive to answer Yasser Arafat's call by urging our colleague in the Security Council to vote in favor of admitting Palestine. It is the least we could do to honor the debt, yes, the debt we owe to its people. We say it loudly. The international community stands with you, Palestine. We remain steadfast in our commitment to a peaceful, sovereign, and independent Palestinian state. This historical injustice must be addressed. The scale of justice must be rebalanced. Madam President, we firmly believe Palestine fulfills all UN membership criteria as defined by the founding fathers in the Charter. We urge every member to support this resolution. It is time for Palestine to take its rightful place among the community of nations. Seeking a UN membership is a fundamental expression of Palestinian self-determination. The admission strengthens, not undermines, the two-state solution, a solution constantly under threat from those who seek to erase Palestinian identity, Palestinian aspirations. Peace will come from Palestine's inclusion, not from its exclusion. While acknowledging the challenges, yes, colonization, annexation, violence, and denial of Palestinian rights, our response must be clear. Admit Palestine as a first fundamental step toward peace. This membership will definitely consecrate the two-state solution that the occupying authorities continue to stand openly against. This membership will constitute a rejection of their attempt to erase the Palestinian people and to destroy the Palestinian state and every prospect of peace. Let us welcome Palestine to the UN, and in doing so, relaunch a genuine peace process between equals, paving the way for a lasting peace in the Middle East. Failure to do so, it is, again, a denial of this very Council of its responsibilities. Failure to act is a serious and forgivable mistake. Failure to wake up today is a license for continuing injustice and impunity. Failure to do so is everlasting shame. The call for Palestinian freedom must be heeded. The call for free Palestine, resonating across the globe, must be a reality enjoyed by the Palestinian people. Madam President, I conclude with what the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has stated before the General Assembly last year. And I quote, "The time has come for Palestine to become a full member of the United Nations, even though its territory remains occupied. We will not abandon this cause, and we will not rest until the objective is achieved." I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Algeria for their statement. I shall now put the draft resolution to the vote. Will those in favour of the draft resolution contained in document S/2024/312 please raise their hand? Okay, we've been recorded 12, right? Okay. Those against? Thank you. Abstentions? The draft resolution has not been adopted owing to, the result of the vote is as follows. 12 votes in favour, 1 vote against, 2 abstentions. The draft resolution has not been adopted owing to the negative vote of a permanent member of the Council. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make statements after the vote. I pass the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Madam President, Madam President, Madam President, this day may go down in history as a day when, after 3/4 of a century, the international community at last made the right choice on the path towards correcting the many years of historical injustice done to Palestine and the legitimate aspirations of its heroic people. Because it was a simple question: are the Palestinians worthy of being part of the global family, fully participating in all of the decisions of international life? And a question that we have constantly answered with consent. And when Israel was welcomed into the UN, and when dozens of states also released from the colonial yoke were welcomed into the UN. However, our American colleagues believe differently. Having for the 5th time since the beginning of the exacerbation in Gaza their veto, they have once again demonstrated what they really think of the Palestinians. For Washington, they do not deserve to have their own state. They are only a barrier on the path towards realizing the interests of Israel. For that reason, the United States is ready to the last to turn a blind eye to the crimes of Israel against the civilians in Gaza, not noting the illegal settlement building activity in West Jerusalem on the West Bank. The aim is to break the Palestinians' will, to force them once and for all to submit to the occupying power, to turn them into servants and second-class persons, and perhaps to once and for all force them out of their native territory. That policy is only having the opposite impact. At present, an absolute majority of the global community supports Palestine's application to become a full member of the World Organization. The suffering of Palestinian civilians is resounding in the hearts and minds of millions of people around the world. In countries that supply weapons to West Jerusalem, there are louder and louder voices calling for those supplies to be banned. Today's use of the veto by the US delegation is a hopeless attempt to stop the inevitable course of history. The results of the vote, where Washington was practically in complete isolation, speak for themselves. With the most playing into the hands of the most irrational actions by their ally and reluctant to find just solutions on the basis of the existing international legal basis, is a direct path to the further sliding into the mire of war which could encompass the entire region. If the United States and Israel benefit from this, then it will only be in the short term. At the same time, Washington will once and for all remove itself from the list of peace-loving and respected states, having fully shared responsibility with its Israeli allies for the deaths of tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians. And that is not worthy of a great power, and history will not forgive you for that. We call on the United States to listen to the voice of reason, to think about the consequences of their decisions, and to immediately join in the efforts of the other members of the Security Council to establish an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation and pass the floor to the United States.
Thank you, Madam President. The United States has worked vigorously and with determination to support Palestinian statehood in the context of a comprehensive peace agreement that would permanently resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Since the attacks of October 7, President Biden has been clear that sustainable peace in the region can only be achieved through a two-state solution, with Israel's security guaranteed. There is no other path that guarantees Israel's security and future as a democratic Jewish state. There is no other path that guarantees Palestinians can live in peace and with dignity in a state of their own. And there is no other path that leads to regional integration between Israel and all its Arab neighbors, including Saudi Arabia. We also have long been clear that premature actions here in New York, even with the best intentions, will not achieve statehood for the Palestinian people. As members of the Security Council, we have a special responsibility to ensure that our actions further the cause of international peace and security and are consistent with the requirements of the UN Charter. As reflected in the report of the Admission Committee, there was not unanimity among committee members as to whether the applicant met the criteria for membership as set forth in Article 4 of the UN Charter. For example, there are unresolved questions as to whether the applicant meets the criteria to be considered a state. We have long called on the Palestinian Authority to undertake necessary reforms to help establish the attributes of readiness for statehood, and note that Hamas, a terrorist organization, is currently exerting power and influence in Gaza, an integral part of the state envisioned in this resolution. For these reasons, the United States voted no on this Security Council resolution. Again, the United States continues to strongly support a two-state solution. This vote does not reflect opposition to Palestinian statehood, but instead is an acknowledgement that it will only come from direct negotiations between the parties. A central focus of U.S. policy prior to October 7 the October 7 Hamas terrorist attacks was to promote normalization between Israel and its Arab neighbors and, as a critical element of a normalization package, generate tangible benefits and a political horizon for the Palestinian people. This was based on the U.S. judgment that normalization is the most viable pathway to make progress on what had been an intractable situation between the Israelis and the Palestinians. In the aftermath of October 7, conversations on potential normalization and a political horizon for the Palestinians that would lead to statehood and membership at the UN have continued. Hamas and its Iranian backers would probably prefer this effort not succeed, but we are determined to see it through. It remains the U.S. view that the most expeditious path towards statehood for the Palestinian people is through direct negotiations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority with the support of the United States and other partners. We believe this approach can tangibly advance Palestinian goals in a meaningful and enduring way. We also believe, in light of Iran's unprecedented and outrageous actions over the last week, that Israel's neighbors would stand to benefit greatly from normalization. The United States is committed to intensifying its engagement with the Palestinians and the rest of the region, not only to address the current crisis in Gaza, but to advance a political settlement that will create a path to Palestinian statehood and membership in the United Nations. The United States will continue to oppose unilateral measures that undermine the prospect of a two-state solution. This includes any actions that violate the principles that Secretary Blinken has emphasized for months, that Gaza cannot be a platform for terrorism. There should be no Israeli reoccupation of Gaza, and the size of Gaza's territory should not be reduced. As we have said before, we believe a two-state solution coupled with these elements is the best way to achieve a durable peace in the region, along with security for Israelis and Palestinians. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the United States and pass the floor to the representative of France. Je vous remercie, Madame la
Thank you, Madam President. France would like to thank Algeria for proposing this resolution, which it voted in favor of. It is time to achieve a global political settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on the basis of the two-state solution, the only thing that can respond to the long-term security needs of Israel, as well as the legitimate aspirations of Palestinians for a state. As the President of the Republic recalled, France is not shying away from this issue, and it is in this context that, upon the initiative of Algeria, we are in favor of raising the status of Palestine in the UN and its admission as a full member. This admission must allow for the resumption of a decisive and irreversible process to implement the two-state solution and the strengthening of the Palestinian Authority in the Palestinian territories in Gaza and in the West Bank. It must be able to effectively and efficiently exercise its responsibilities across the territories of a future Palestinian state. The conflict in Gaza, triggered by the terrorist attack by Hamas and other terrorist groups on the 7th of October, which we condemn in the strongest possible terms, shows how essential it is for the Security Council to determinedly commit to a political solution to the conflict while also strengthening its humanitarian action. We thus continue to demand an immediate and lasting ceasefire and the immediate and unconditional release of all of the hostages. Thank you.
Thank the representative of France and pass the floor to the representative of Guyana.
Thank you, Madam President. And I wish to thank the delegation of Algeria for putting forward the resolution and for being fully transparent from the very beginning about the approach it intended to take. 13 years after the last request, today, another call for justice by the Palestinian people was made, but the Council's response was not enough to deliver that justice. Guyana raised its hand for justice today because, for us, it was the right choice, and it was long overdue. The Palestinian question has been before this Council since 1947. From that time, there have been at least 792 formal meetings of this Council. An examination of those meeting records provided some key revelations about the Council's approach to the Palestinian question, 3 of which I will highlight very briefly. First, over these decades, Council members have, inter alia, acknowledged the need to address the various dimensions of the Palestinian question, consistently stressed the need for the Palestinian people to exercise their right to self-determination, and emphasized the need for the realization of the two-state solution. However, while this shows that the Council has largely been sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, this sympathy has not generated enough political will to achieve a comprehensive, just, and lasting solution to the Palestinian question. This takes me to my second point, Madam President. The Council's historic sympathy for the Palestinian people has led to many band-aid measures to address the symptoms of the Palestinian question. We have not been able to comprehensively address the root cause of the problem, the lengthy delay in the creation of an independent state of Palestine. The resolution we voted on a moment ago was an important step towards addressing this gap, and Guyana deeply regrets that it was not adopted. Without getting to the root of the problem, the symptoms will persist, and the reactive cycle will continue. The people of Palestine deserve a clear political horizon and a path to a comprehensive and just peace. The third issue is the serious lack of accountability that has accompanied the Palestinian question from 1948 to present day. If the occupying power were held to account for its continuous violations of international law, the path to a free and independent Palestine would have been cleared a long time ago. The impunity must end. Madam President, Ghana supports the State of Palestine's full membership of the United Nations and believes that it has met all the requirements set out in Article 4 of the United Nations Charter, which are the only ones to be taken into consideration for the admission of a member into the United Nations. We are therefore deeply disappointed that the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people were not met today. Guyana had hoped that the Council's historic sympathy and apparent empathy with the Palestinian cause could have translated into strong political will this time around, given the existential threat Palestinians currently face. Notwithstanding, Guyana reaffirms its unwavering commitment to continue working with this Council and the entire UN membership to secure justice for the Palestinian people. To the Palestinian people, Guyana will never abandon you. We will continue to use our voice until justice is served. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Guyana and pass the floor to Slovenia.
Thank you, Madam President. Slovenia voted in favor of the recommendation of the Security Council for membership of the State of Palestine in the United Nations. The two-state solution, where two democratic states, Israel and Palestine, live side by side in peace, is the only long-term sustainable option. Slovenia continues calling for full respect of international law and the peaceful resolution of conflicts. And at this point, our main objectives continue being twofold: addressing the current situation in Gaza and resuming political process towards a two-state solution. We are of the view that the membership of the State of Palestine in the UN could significantly support this process, which should address all outstanding issues, support the State of Palestine, and guarantee security for Israel. Membership in the UN is not an alternative to negotiations, but complementary to them. We believe that the UN should play a crucial role in the peace process, and therefore both states should have an equal status at the UN. Madam President, Slovenia is of the view that Palestine meets the criteria set out by Article 4 of the UN Charter. Granting membership in the UN to Palestine could be an important step towards peace. It would strengthen the role of the Palestinian Authority and would contribute to the security of Israel as well. We maintain our view that Palestine's right to self-determination and UN membership are not contrary to Israel's right to exist and be secure.
we believe any two-state solution must be built on mutual recognition and sovereign equality. Thank you.
Thank the representative of Slovenia and pass the floor to the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President. It was 1949 when the Republic of Korea first applied for membership to the United Nations. However, it was not until 1991, 42 long years after its original application, that the Republic of Korea given the UN membership. Thus, we can clearly attest to the meaning of aspirations of people to be admitted to these paramount international organizations. Madam President, the Republic of Korea believes that the only viable and sustainable way to resolve the Palestinian questions and establish lasting peace is through the realization of the two-state solution. Yet, for several decades, negotiations between parties have been stalled. The Republic of Korea voted in favor of the draft resolutions on the admission of Palestine into the UN in consideration of our view that renewed and strengthened efforts are needed to revitalize the path toward two-state solutions. Regardless of today's results on the draft resolution, we hope that the parties will soon resume negotiations based on dialogue and compromise for a peaceful resolution of the Palestine question. And to this end, the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza must end soon. We once again call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the immediate and unconditional release of hostages held by Hamas and other groups, and expanded humanitarian aid throughout Gaza. All regional actors should exercise full restraint to avert further dangerous escalation in the region. Under this backdrop, even though today's draft resolution on the admission of Palestine was not adopted, it is clear that all members of the Security Council share the imperative of the two-state solutions as the most viable long-term resolutions to the Palestine questions and the best way to lessen long-standing regional tensions more broadly. It is to be noted that our vote today does not constitute bilateral recognition of Palestine as a state. In the future, we will consider this matter at a time that is most conducive to the resolution of the conflict. We also hope that the negotiations between parties can resume in the near future. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea and pass the floor to the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. The United Kingdom reiterates its commitment to making progress towards a two-state solution in which a safe and secure Israel lives alongside a sovereign, viable Palestinian state. We agree that the people of the West Bank and Gaza must be given the political perspective of a credible route to a Palestinian state and a new future. And it needs to be irreversible. This is not entirely in our gift, but our recognition of a Palestinian state should be part of it. We believe that such recognition of Palestinian statehood should not come at the start of a new process, but it doesn't have to be at the very end of the process. We must start with fixing the immediate crisis in Gaza. Gaza is occupied Palestinian territory and must be part of a future Palestinian state. However, Hamas is still in control of parts of Gaza, and Israeli hostages remain in captivity. This shows that we're still at the start of the process. Ensuring Hamas is no longer in charge of Gaza and removing Hamas' capacity to launch attacks against Israel are essential and unavoidable steps on the road to lasting peace, as is working together to support the new Palestinian government as it takes much-needed steps on reform and resumes governance in Gaza as well as the West Bank. We abstained on this resolution today because we must keep our focus on securing an immediate pause in order to get aid in and hostages out. Then, making progress towards a sustainable ceasefire without a return to destruction, fighting, and loss of life. Our Foreign Secretary has been in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories this week to offer our support towards achieving this. We will continue to work urgently to help bring peace and galvanize a political process towards a two-state solution which provides justice and security for both Israelis and Palestinians. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom and pass the floor to Japan.
Thank you, Madam President. Last month, the Security Council was able to finally adopt a resolution which demands an immediate ceasefire in Gaza in the hopes of bringing about a real change on the ground. However, a ceasefire has not been realized, and the humanitarian catastrophe is deepening. The people of Gaza are facing unprecedented tragedy and hardship. Much of Gaza's population lives in despair with little food and water, deprived of human dignity. In the meantime, serious diplomatic efforts are being made to bring about a cessation of hostilities and release of the hostages. We reiterate our strong support for the crucial role of the United States, Egypt, and Qatar to this end, and appreciate their tireless efforts. Once a sustainable ceasefire is in place, a reconstruction mechanism for Gaza with the support of the international community and the establishment of effective governance by a reformed Palestinian Authority will be essential. Madam President, Japan has strongly upheld the Palestinian rights to self-determination and consistently supported a two-state solution in which Israel and the future independent Palestinian state live side by side in peace and security. We have provided maximum support for Palestinian state-building efforts from political, economic, and social aspects for decades. Our principled position was reflected in our vote in favor of the 2012 General Assembly resolution granting Palestine the status of non-member observer state at the United Nations, and expressing the hope that the Security Council would consider favorably the application of Palestine for admission to full UN membership. Madam President, this is the first time since 2011 that the Security Council has deliberated on Palestinian membership in the United Nations. The intervening years have been marked by little progress in direct negotiations between the parties, whereas most recently we have witnessed escalating regional conflict that has caused untold suffering. At this critical moment, Japan voted in favor of today's draft resolution as a comprehensive decision, recognizing that Palestine meets the criteria for admission to the United Nations membership, while also taking into account the perspective of promoting the establishment of a Palestinian state through peaceful negotiations between the parties concerned. I thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Japan and pass the floor to the representative of Switzerland.
Thank you, Madam President. Switzerland abstained on this draft resolution. Without opposing it, we believe that at the present time, it is not appropriate for the particular situation, given the ongoing conflict. We think it would be preferable to determine Palestinians' membership at the United Nations at a future stage once there has been peace. This just
will not change the position of Switzerland, our strong position on a two-state solution. We believe that only a negotiated two-state solution for Israel and Palestine living side by side in security will lead to lasting peace between Israel and Palestine. Madam President, we have just referred to a detail, the catastrophic situation in the Middle East. What we must urgently do is ensure the immediate implementation of this Council's resolutions and a ceasefire. We must do this without further ado if we want to give people the possibility of a peaceful future which will enable everyone to live in dignity, to restore political and negotiated solutions to this conflict. Switzerland is prepared to support any effort which will lead to hope for peace through a democratic two-state solution, two states living side by side within safe and recognized borders based on the 1967 borders, including with Gaza as an integral part of a Palestinian state. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Switzerland and pass the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, President. President, today is a sad day. Because of the veto by the United States, the application by Palestine for full membership at the UN has been rejected. The decade-long dream of the Palestinian people ruthlessly dashed. China finds the decision by the US most disappointing. An independent state of Palestine has been a long-cherished intergenerational dream of the Palestinian people. Its full membership at the UN is a crucial step in that historical direction and process. As early as 2011, Palestine submitted an application. Because of some countries' opposition, the Council's action at that time was put on hold. 13 years are long enough. And yet, we still hear some complaints asserting that there isn't enough time and there is no need to rush into actions. These claims are disingenuous. The admission of Palestine as a full member of the UN is more urgent now than ever before. The relevant countries premised its inability to support Palestine in UN's membership is on the grounds that the state of Palestine does not have the capacity to govern. We do not agree with this assessment. Over the past 13 years, the situation in Palestine has changed in many ways, the most fundamental of which has been the expansion of settlements in the West Bank. Palestine's viable space as a state has been steadily squeezed. The foundation of the
有些国家对此视而不见，采取默许甚至纵容的态度。现在又反过来质疑巴勒斯坦不具备执政能力，这完全是混淆是非的强盗逻辑。更令人不可接受的是，有关国家还在质疑巴勒斯坦是否符合联合国宪章规定的会员国资格，暗示巴勒斯坦是否爱好和平还是个问题。这样的指控未免太过分。对于饱受被占领之苦的巴勒斯坦人民来说，不至于在伤口上撒盐，是极大的侮辱。如果出于政治算计，不支持巴勒斯坦成为联合国正式会员国，不妨大方地说出来，而不必找借口对巴勒斯坦人民进行二次伤害。主席，独立建国是巴勒斯坦人民不可剥夺的民族权利，不容置疑，不容交易。有关国家将巴以直接谈判作为前提，声称巴勒斯坦加入联合国只能是谈判得到的结果，这是本末倒置。在以色列方面越来越明确拒绝两国方案的情况下，由联合国接纳巴勒斯坦国成为正式会员国，可以让巴勒斯坦享有同以色列平等的地位，将有助于为恢复巴以谈判创造条件。所有真心支持两国方案的国家都不应该反对巴勒斯坦正式加入联合国。主席，历史车轮滚滚向前，时代大势不容抗拒。我们相信，总有一天，巴勒斯坦国将在联合国享有同其他所有会员国同等的权利。巴勒斯坦和以色列作为两个国家可以比邻而居。 和平共处。
As neighbors, with the two peoples, Palestinians and Israelis, living in tranquility and happiness. China will continue to make unremitting efforts and play a constructive role for the early realization of that day. And thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China and pass the floor to Ecuador.
Gracias. Thank you, Madam President. Historically, Ecuador has supported the Palestinian people in their legitimate right to be free from foreign intervention, and we have supported processes which would lead to their self-determination and full independence in accordance with the founding principles of international law and the UN Charter. On the 24th of December 2010, Ecuador recognized Palestine as a free and independent state with the 1967 borders. Subsequent to that, in 2012, Ecuador co-sponsored and voted in favor of the resolution in which the General Assembly considered the condition of observer state for Palestine, and since 2014, Ecuador has maintained an embassy in Ramallah and Palestine has an embassy in Quito. Today, once again, Ecuador's vote has shown our commitment to the Palestinian people, reaffirming our recognition, the recognition of Palestine that we made 14 years ago, and our country hopes that in the very near future the conditions will exist which will enable this Council unanimously to allow Palestine to become a full-fledged member of the United Nations. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Ecuador and pass the floor to Mozambique.
Madam President, Mozambique commends the presidency of Malta for convening this meeting to take action on this historic draft resolution on the admission of the State of Palestine to the United Nations. We extend our deep appreciation to Algeria and to the entire Arab group for their leadership in tabling this text before the Council. Madam President, on August 12, 1988, the Republic of Mozambique formally recognized the State of Palestine as an independent and sovereign state. We did so because of our deep belief that peoples are born with the inherent right to self-determination, independence, and sovereignty. This right is deeply anchored in the Charter of the United Nations, in the principles and norms of international law, and in the natural law itself. It is a right that does not depend on a plebiscite or referendum, or for that matter, on a judgment of other alien peoples or governments. It is therefore on that basis that we, Mozambique, as many other nations in the world, were born and entered the concert of nations. We were admitted in the United Nations family in September 1975 after 10 years protracted liberation struggle. We wish to remind that as of today, April 18, 2024, 140 United Nations member states have extended their recognition to the State of Palestine. This quasi-universal recognition is a testament that Palestine fulfills the requirements of statehood that include population, territory, government, and the capacity to engage into relations with the other states. We consider that conditions are ripe for Palestine to be a full member of the United Nations. Under Article 4 of the Charter, and on the basis of our record since 1988, Palestine is clearly a peace-loving nation. Throughout the years, it has demonstrated its acceptance of the obligations contained in the Charter, and it has shown the ability and willingness to carry out those obligations contained in the Charter, as we said. We wish to state that Mozambique entertains diplomatic relations with the state of Israel. This is the foundation on which we embrace the vision of a two-state solution, of two independent and sovereign states, Israel and Palestine, both as full members of the United Nations, coexisting as good neighbors, living side by side in peace and security, as prescribed by the Charter of the United Nations and by the relevant resolutions of the Security Council and the General Assembly. This is, in particular, fully in line with the United Nations Security Council Resolution 242, unanimously adopted by this Council on November 22nd, 1967. These are, Madam President, the reasons why Mozambique has voted in favor of this draft resolution. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Mozambique and pass the floor to Sierra Leone.
Madam President, I thank you for convening this meeting, and we commend the Presidency of Malta for the manner in which it has conducted the work of the Admission Committee and the Security Council on the important application for admission to membership of the United Nations by the State of Palestine. I also thank Algeria for submitting the draft resolution and their leadership in the Council regarding the plight and aspirations of the Palestinian people. In the high-level open debate on the Middle East-Palestine question, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Sierra Leone this morning elaborated on our position on the issue. That is, in the context of the request for the admission of the State of Palestine as a member of the United Nations, 13 years after Palestine's application was first considered by the Security Council Admissions Committee. Sierra Leone said recognizes the basis for such a request, which in our view is legitimate and could create the pathway to a political horizon founded on the principles of a two-state solution based on United Nations General Assembly Resolution 1812, which recommends for an independent Arab and an independent Jewish state, and in line with Article 4 of the UN Charter. Sierra Leone supported and voted for the draft resolution for the State of Palestine to be admitted as a member of the United Nations. Our support was in line and within the context of our esteemed consideration of Article 4 of the UN Charter and the guidance provided by the International Court of Justice in its 28 May 1948 advisory opinion on conditions of admission of a state to membership in the United Nations. We regret that the draft resolution was not adopted. We have the firm view that membership would have resonated with the principle of equality of states as enshrined in the UN Charter, and certainly would have strengthened the two-state solution with an independent Arab and an independent Jewish state living side by side in peace, security, and stability. The State of Palestine membership at the United Nations may have been delayed
as often in regrettable periods of injustice, but as the arc of the moral universe, which may be long but bends towards justice, the UN membership for the State of Palestine cannot be denied. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone and pass the floor to Algeria.
Madam President, again, on behalf of the Arab Group, of the OIC, and the non-aligned movement, and also all peace-loving member states, I'm deeply grateful to all those who voted in favor of the resolution we submitted. The overwhelming support for the application of the State of Palestine sends a crystal clear message. The State of Palestine deserves its rightful place among the members of the United Nations. To those who were unable to support the admission of the State of Palestine today, we hope, we really hope, they will have to do so next time when the Security Council will reconsider the question of admission of Palestine again. Yes, we will return stronger and more vocal, and we will be backed by the overwhelmingly majority of the General Assembly of the United Nations. Madam President, as President Al-Majid Tebboune of Algeria has said, Algeria's effort will not cease until the State of Palestine becomes a full member of the United Nations. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria. I will now make a statement in my national capacity. In voting today for the admission of Palestine as a member of the United Nations, Malta has made a clear choice. We voted in favor of the two-state solution. We have voted in favor of an idea that has enjoyed the support of the vast majority of the international community for decades. UN membership is a necessary step for the Palestinians to achieve equal footing with the rest of the international community. The request for UN membership comes at a difficult juncture. The unprecedented turmoil that has followed the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza is pushing the Palestinian people to a hopeless precipice. Malta has been unequivocal that an immediate and permanent ceasefire is necessary to allow the necessary space for peace and put a stop to further civilian suffering. Concrete efforts must also be made to bolster the Palestinian Authority towards governance over a unified West Bank and Gaza Strip. We deeply regret that following today's veto, this legitimate aspiration has not been realized. However, we must not lose sight of its validity. The realization of the two-state solution, along with efforts to promote sustainable solutions to the ongoing conflicts in the region, remains the only realistic foundation for sustainable peace and stability in the Middle East. It is our collective responsibility to explore all possible paths towards this just realization. I thank you. I now resume my function as President of the Council. I now give the floor to the Permanent Observer of the Observer State of Palestine.
السيد الرئيس.
Madam President.
لم يكن يوم.
Madam President. Our right to self-determination has never once been subject to bargaining or negotiation. Our right to self-determination is a natural right, a historic right, a legal right, a right to live in our homeland, Palestine, as an independent state that is free and that is sovereign. Our right to self-determination is inalienable. It is not tied to a time or a time frame. Our right is eternal, permanent, and continuous. It cannot be delayed. It cannot be suspended. And it has no statute of limitations. It is important that this right not be subject to manipulation or domination or conditions, especially not by Israel, the occupying power, the ethnic cleansing power, the genocidal power, the colonial power that is determined to evict our people from their homeland, to eliminate their identity and to replace their history and their culture, and to uproot their present and their civilization, and to besiege their future and their horizons. The people of Palestine will not disappear. We will not disappear. The people of Palestine will not be buried. They are a historical fact. They are a history that cannot be erased, no matter the great power, no matter the tyranny. This Palestinian people, the glorious people of Palestine, remained on their land, not out of charity or mercy from Israel, but out of patience and steadfastness and hope and sacrifice, despite the occupation, despite the oppression, despite exile, enslavement, besiege, despite being persecuted and displaced and evicted and driven away as refugees. We have repeatedly warned of Israel's colonial policy in our land, which it not simply declares openly, but now boasts of it. We have warned of the absence of a horizon for a resolution. We have warned of the dangers of ignoring the Palestinian cause and its central nature, of ignoring the suffering of the Palestinian people, which is only growing. We have warned of the dangers of claiming that a just peace is possible in our region without a just, comprehensive, and lasting resolution to the Palestinian question. Madam President, we came to the Security Council today at an important historic moment, regionally and internationally, so that we could salvage what can be saved. We place you before a historic responsibility to establish the foundations of a just and comprehensive peace in our region. You are before the opportunity to revive the hope that has been lost amongst our peoples. We put you before the responsibility of interpreting and translating your commitment toward a two-state solution along the 1967 lines into actual action, firm action, that cannot be maneuvered or retracted. The majority of the Security Council members have risen to the level of this historic moment, and they have stood on the side of justice and freedom and hope, in line with the ethical and humanitarian and legal principles that must govern our world, and in line with simple logic. Here, we renew our sincere appreciation to sisterly Algeria. and to the Arab and Islamic groups and the member states of the non-aligned movement and the Maltese presidency of the Council, a dedicated presidency that has managed our proceedings wisely. We express our appreciation to all of those who supported the Palestinian membership request and all of those who voted in favor of the draft resolution.
By all of your statements, those who voted in favor and even those who voted differently, of the passion that it contained in your commitment and understanding the pain and the moment of the Palestinian people. I salute you in the name of the Palestinian people and their leadership. Sayyid al-Rais.
Madam President, we accepted the two-state solution along the 1967 borders as an international vision of peace. The Arab states put forth the Arab Peace Initiative to support this vision. We built our state with the efforts of our sons and daughters and with the support and trust of the international community, despite the obstacles placed by Israel. We have engaged in the peace process in a manner that would secure our supreme national interests, and we have abided by the foundations of a peaceful and legal settlement to the conflict. The Palestinian leadership, under the presidency of President Mahmoud Abbas, continues to be committed to this peaceful track, and we renew our call for an international peace conference to be held under multilateral international sponsorship, a conference that aims to put an end to the Israeli occupation and achieve the independence of the state of Palestine. But the question remains, is there a true partner for peace in Israel? Is there a partner in peace with us in Israel? Israel insists, through its consecutive governments, it insists on maintaining occupation, on murder, on siege, on the eviction of people, on building settlements. These are all policies and practices that run counter to the United Nations Charter and to the resolutions of the United Nations, and all aim to achieve just one objective, namely to snuff out any hope of a sovereign Palestinian state, of a Palestinian state that exists as a viable state. Israel believes that the state of Palestine is a permanent strategic threat to it and will do its best to block the sovereignty of a Palestinian state and to make sure that the Palestinian people are exiled away from their homeland or remain under its occupation forever. It is up to you now to determine who loves peace and who is the enemy of peace. Who loves peace and who is the enemy of peace. Who wants to save the lives of innocents and who seeks to perpetrate genocide. Israel does not want a two-state solution. Israel does not want a state of Palestine. This is Israel's scheme. This was approved by the Knesset and is publicly announced by the Knesset members. And it's very representative in this council and anywhere in the United Nations and outside of the United Nations does so. This is a plan that is claimed by Israeli government officials and politicians. Netanyahu even boasted about this as a political achievement, boasting that he succeeded in preventing the rise of a Palestinian state. He declared this in his imaginary map, the map that he brought with him to the General Assembly last September. A map of Israel from the river to the sea. A map that annihilates the existence of Palestine. This is the plan of his extremist government, to get rid of Palestine, to get rid of the Palestinians. This delusion, unfortunately, costs innocent lives. And do you know what Israel needs to implement this delusional plan? The plan to evict the people and to annex the land? All it needs is more time, more immunity, and more lives and blood. What will the international community do? What will you do? You, the International Security Council that is charged with the maintenance of international peace and security, what are you going to do? What will you do? Will you give Israel the time it needs to annex Palestinian land? Will you give it the immunity to evict the people and kill them? Will you give Israel the weapons to kill more people? Will you give Israel the right to veto our right to exist on our land, to veto the Palestinian state's right to full membership in the United Nations? Palestine's membership in the United Nations is not symbolic. It is a matter of great importance to Palestinians and to the peoples of the region at this very sensitive time. It is something that they have been awaiting since 1947.
Since 1949 until 92. We've been waiting since 1947, and we are in 2024. هي خطوة ضرورية.
This is an important step to rectify a historic injustice that befell the Palestinian people since the partition resolution and through the Nakba and until this very day. It is an important step to revive faith in international legitimacy, in international law, and in this very organization and its charter, and to revive hope in the peaceful settlement of the conflict. Giving Palestine the membership is a manifestation of our right to self-determination. It consolidates the legitimacy of the state of Palestine in a manner that is irreversible and cannot be denied by any party. It protects and preserves the land of the state of Palestine so that it is not divvied up as happened before. Palestine's membership in the United Nations is an investment in peace.
Admit us to membership. It's an investment in peace. وانطلاقا له إن عضويتنا الكاملة.
Our full membership in the United Nations does not detract from the rights of any other member state, nor does this membership threaten or cancel out the membership of any other state.
Equal to all of you. We don't want to replace anyone. We want to enter your club as equal. إن تأييدكم.
Granting Palestine full membership has put us on the path of hope, to keep the hope alive. The fact that this resolution did not pass will not break our will, and it will not defeat our determination. We will not stop in our effort. The state of Palestine is inevitable. It is real. Perhaps they see it as far away, but we see it as near, and we are the faithful. Madam President, we are the ones who experience oppression and injustice. We know more than anyone else the nature of this oppressive occupation because we live it. We know best what a just solution is, and we tell you that the time for freedom is now.
For freedom, where is the time for free Palestine? تذكروا أن بعد نهاية.
Please remember that once this session adjourns in Palestine, there are innocents paying the price with their lives and the lives of their children, the price of this Israeli action, a price to the double standards, the blind bias towards Israel, the price for the delay in justice, freedom, and peace. Madam President, the Palestinian people have borne more than they can handle. They have suffered all forms of torture at the hands of the Israeli occupier. It has become clear now, more than any time before, that this glorious people have not and will not forfeit the right to their land. Despite the gravity of the suffering, of the tragedy, of the destruction, of displacement, our Palestinian people have never lost their humanity. Our Palestinian people now are searching for the remnants of life. And you will not find a people who have a stronger desire to live an ordinary life like our people in Gaza. Gaza of pride, Gaza of glory.
بل أن شعبنا الفلسطيني كافة.
Our Palestinian people, wherever they are, want life. They cling onto life, just like the other peoples on this planet. The Palestinians are a people who aspire to freedom, to a dignified life, to a peaceful existence. The people of Palestine will not disappear. The people of Palestine will not be buried. The Palestinian people have never been unnecessary. You either do us justice or you do it justice.
We love life, to live in freedom and dignity in our national homeland. We will not disappear. Either you deal with us with fairness and give us our rights, or give us our rights. Thank you very much.
I thank the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I wish to begin by thanking the United States, and particularly President Biden, for standing up for truth and morality in the face of hypocrisy and politics. Colleagues, I sat here mere hours ago describing why this resolution is destructive. I explained how the Palestinian Authority does not meet even the basic criteria, that they have no authority over their territory, and that the Palestinian Authority is a terror-supporting entity. How can you say seriously that the Palestinians are peace-loving? How? The Palestinians are paying terrorists, paying them to slaughter us. None of their leaders condemns terrorism, nor the October 7th massacre. They call Hamas their brothers. The Palestinian representative called Hamas his brothers after the massacre. And they don't even recognize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. You won't find even one Palestinian leader who would tell you that he recognizes Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. Peace-loving indeed. Hamas wasn't mentioned here today, And it's not a coincidence, because the Palestinian representative here does not represent Hamas. He does not represent at least half of the Palestinian people. Yet, regardless of the Palestinians' failure to meet the necessary criteria for UN membership, most of you, sadly, decided to reward Palestinian terror with Palestinian state. It's very sad, because your vote will only embolden Palestinian rejectionism even more and make peace almost impossible. Please remember this the next time the Palestinians reject another peace plan or refuse to even come to the negotiating table. Colleagues, I have represented Israel at the UN for over 3 years. I have taken part in dozens of meetings in this council, and since the October 7th massacre, I have been here on a near weekly basis, sometimes daily basis. I repeat the same arguments in every debate. I plead, I convince, at least try to convince. I bring testimonies, present photos, and show video footage. But nevertheless, you refuse to even condemn. You refuse to listen. You refuse to act. You even refuse to check the facts. So today, I won't try to fix what is already broken. Speaking to this council is like speaking to a brick wall. I pray that the day will come and you will understand the magnitude of the mistake that you are making here. I pray that you will understand before it's too late. Thank you.
There are no more names inscribed in the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.